ultimately, it's up to you. Hey, welcome, folks. My name is Chris Jansen. This is the End Evil podcast. Evil is the destruction of freedom. And I've been having a quest recently to meet some new friends, alike minds. And it started for me going down this path on the Library of the Untold YouTube channel. And then I came across Gamma AU Obsidian. And we've been chatting back and forth on Discord. I've been watching his videos and they got me thinking and gave me some inspiration. So we just got together and started chatting, and we're realizing, man, this chat's golden. We should be recording. So we just turned the recording on. Thanks for joining me, Mr. Gamma. How are you doing?
Man. Yeah, we really lost out on that one. No, that was like an hour of gold.
Yeah. It's all in the what do they call it? The Akashic record, right? Like it's
Akashic records.
Yeah. Somewhere.
That's funny.
Have you looked into that Akashic record thing? What do you think about that?
Man, that there's a whole aspect of the metaphysical sphere, the metaphysical community that I very much want and wanted to be real for me specifically. I tried all the things, meditation. I tried astral traveling methods and all these things. And I've talked a good bit in a few videos about my position on it, not being like, oh, well, those are fake. But when there are very specific conversations that you can end up in where someone does that given thing. It's not just science and academia that does it. There are many, many beings within the spiritual metaphysical community that are like, so I was in the astrals the other day and James Brown told me that he likes your shit. He's been watching your videos. And it's like, hold on, let's back up just a couple steps. And, it's not to say that I'm telling them that it's not real for them, but I have to be, I have to be authentic within myself and at least let them know, like, I don't have any experience with that. I haven't been able to astral travel, so I don't have a direct connection to that. I'm definitely interested in hearing what they have to say about it. But there are things like that where it's like, it's very, very complex.
Okay, it's a cool concept, it's a cool theory, but I mean, and if I haven't had a practical application, I can't like just jump on board with you on this train and start going down the tracks. I'm like, I didn't even get on the train yet.
Yeah, and it's many take offense to it, and I get it, but within the same breath, like I try to not be dogmatic with my vantage point. And I think that if more of us kind of took that position and left room for others to have experiences without expecting them to assimilate to our own, then things would probably be a lot more progressive. Like things would probably progress a lot more, just because like there are others who will probably say, oh yeah, I also ran into James Brown and he said you suck. You know what I mean? Like there are some that would probably agree with those, and maybe they're the ones that need to have that conversation. But it's like, I think we're all trying to make sense of this place in one way or another. And it's not beneficial or helpful if we just kind of go along to get along instead of being authentic in what we actually have experienced. Because a lot of the time, within those conversations, I can kind of tell that they're maybe not telling the truth, and maybe that is some form of currency that they've developed within being in these circles. Like, I need to tell this dude my best astral travel story or he's not going to think I'm really into metaphysics. And that's not necessary for me. Let's talk about what you studied or what you've read. Like, if you've been investigating ancient Babylonian there's other stuff. It doesn't have to immediately go to that. And even in situations where they're being genuine, it's cool. Just, like you said, I don't have direct connection to many things, but there are other things where I do. There's molecules that I've tried that have led me to very, very profound uh realizations and experiences that um, are as real to me as those experiences may be to them.
Yeah, and that whole human experiencing thing, I remember a specific time in my like development of realizing things, because I had a period of time where I was having some pretty like far out experiences and thoughts, and I was even well aware that these would be viewed by someone else as being uh like crazy stuff. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because I was getting kind of like what I would describe as like a download. It was just like so much information and energy and feelings was pouring into me that I had to like walk at night for hours and I couldn't sleep. And I went through this two different times in my life, similar experiences. And I've heard other people talk about similar kind of experiences. And it's the type of thing where it's very much within my own realm. And I have to be careful how I describe it to someone else. And I've often like quoted, I mean, I wish I could find the exact quote. There's a Thomas Paine book where he talks about my revelation is my revelation. As soon as I start explaining to you, it's no longer my revelation. Now I'm trying to tell you about my revelation. So we each have this inner experience through our senses, and we're comparing them to other people's inner experiences, which are subjective, and we're trying to like find the happy medium ground and call that truth. But there's a lot of room for belief in there, so much so, and people's minds are so pliable that people are led down all kinds of fake false roads because they started with one thing that someone that they thought was valuable and honest and true turns out wasn't. They started with a false premise, or what we're calling the given. And so like I think that's where you and I really like kind of met in conversation, and the excitement of realizing that we both have that in common, that we're not the type of souls to just take something for granted without questioning it and running it through our own filter of experience and kind of comparing it with like a metaphor to everything we've seen and be like, does that ring true? you know
Yeah.
or how does
Yeah,
that
man.
pan out?
There's it's embarrassing in a way, but in the same, on the flip side of the coin, it's something to, I think, potentially be proud of. But there are lots of attempts and agendas to bring people into weird, like, kind of cults right now. And that is kind of not necessarily where I started within this specific walk, but I definitely began. Like, if you were to go, man, I shouldn't say it because I don't want anybody to go watch them, but if you were to go watch the stuff that I'm referencing at the beginning of the channel, I'm talking about how I very recently, like right at that moment, started having the realization, like, oh, this is a cult. This is a cult that I'm getting, inspiration from and information from. And the things that they're kind of professing and asserting to be true, you know, um, not just in the vein of like alchemy, where you take it and let it transform you, uh, um, in a metaphysical sense, but they're saying these things about aliens coming back to save you, and they look, it's very, very supremacist. There's just lots of aspects to it that now that I look at them are creepy. And I had to, even in the time where I wasn't thinking of it in that sense, I was having to like quiet parts of myself that I shouldn't have had to um, suppress. Like I don't care about pigment, you know? The way that I view things is you're either a shitty person or you're not. And your pigment, that doesn't control that. It's very, very inconsequential when it comes to that. And that's one of the things that I was kind of suppressing is when I heard you know, a teacher speaking or doing a lecture, depending on how far back I went, they were very, very outspoken with their feelings about the white man or, you know, whatever. And I would just not listen to that part and be like, you know what, that's their thought. You know, I'll just skip past that in my brain. But even though that is something that you can do with someone giving a lecture, you don't have to agree with everything someone says. When it becomes such a repetitive and redundant theme of what they're talking about, it's very similar to, you know, the concept of physics and all that stuff, where, you know, it's like fruit of a poisonous tree. Like even though you're not accepting this aspect of what they're saying, that aspect is a part of a bigger tree that, you know, still has that hanging on the tree. And so it's like it's very strange to see the many, many things that um have caused like growth, but within that, like going back to what you were saying earlier about, like, for instance, downloads, there's this duality where, because they talk about downloads in those circles a lot too. And I had to kind of find a middle ground for myself, because rather than just rejecting it altogether and saying, oh, well, downloads aren't real, I think that they are real. I think that there's a couple of different explanations for what they can be. And are you familiar with ascension symptoms? Have you heard that?
No, I'd like to hear. Go ahead.
So there's a
Ascension
thing
symptom.
that's being pushed within those communities called ascension symptoms, where they're kind of perpetuating and making each other believe that there are, you know, human resonance frequencies and frequencies from the sun and all these things that are changing their DNA, and that they're becoming the deified versions of themselves that they have been from the past. And I believe in self deification, spiritual and mentally, if nothing else, potentially even physically. But if you do a bit of research, the same symptoms that are being, you know, purported to be ascension symptoms are also symptoms of radiation sickness.
Hmm.
They're also symptoms of being attacked with microwaves. And, uh, you know, in 2020, a thing happened and we were all inside for a bit. And when we came back out, all of these large towers were suddenly there, you know? And I have some videos that kind of reference the significance of those towers and the many different things that they can do. And I realized all within that moment that not only are these symptoms essentially a psychological operation to get us to not understand what's happening, much like the reason that we were all inside for 2020. Same thing. They're both the same thing. And so there are these operations that have been put into place essentially to keep us from understanding that we're being attacked, for lack of a better word. And it felt so gross and disingenuous to understand, oh, they view this as such a beautiful and positive thing, but in real, you know, life, they're being hurt physically, ringing in the ears, nausea, all these very insomnia, all these very uncomfortable things. And they're fighting through it because they believe it's transforming them back into their deified self. You know, it's very,
Wow.
very evil, evil stuff.
You know, I kind of see two sides to that in a way, like, because I thought I had a little talk I did with a friend a couple years ago, and we called it dishonest storytelling. So we were kind of bringing up things like the way that we tell kids about Santa Claus, and the things we get told in school, government's good for us, all these kind of pretty blatant lies that we get sold very young that affect us. The storylines sort of define our reality to an extent. And I've noticed in my own personal life, like I've had to go through this journey with confidence, for instance, of like this part of my mind I think might have something to do with traumas from my past that will like talk me down, like you were saying, oh, I'm not a philosopher, oh, I'll never be a I'll never achieve these things because I'm just not that, like, oh, I screwed that up again, like that part of myself that can be really negative and cut away at my confidence. And I've learned to kind of like battle it by telling better stories, and in
Yeah.
some ways I kind of back it up by real things like history. Like when I hear my brain saying, oh, you're gonna screw this up, and be like, you know what? I got this other thing done that seemed hard. I can do this. So I guess what I'm getting at is it is important the stories we tell ourselves. And like I think true alchemy, finding the gold in life is taking the suffering and the pain we're going through and finding a story we can tell ourselves that turns it into our like mission to do better in the world, like we were talking about our great work. But on the other hand, all that dishonest storytelling that's come from the external field, like it's massive and people's minds are pliable and people are trapped in cages in their own head because they're believing these stories that they've been kind of indoctrinated to through their whole lives. And a lot of us don't want to let go of them. We're holding on to them because they're like our security that make us feel comfortable. And when you push too far with certain people, you can see them like they'll start like their eyes will glaze over, or they'll start disagreeing with your point, or try to throw like negativity at you and tell you, they'll start over getting overly critical, not constructively critical. Am I getting off on a tangent, or did I?
No, no, no. It's funny because it's funny that you mentioned that in that way, because one of the things that kind of crossed my mind about that, once I realized it, was, it would be almost uh, divinely comedic if, because they came up with such a good cover story. The avatar is a very amazing thing, and when you couple that with consciousness, and many that have what I would call like the breath of life, or the spark from the divine, you don't know whether or not that could come to fruition. In other words, you telling these beings that they're transforming into X-Men and superheroes, they're telling them all kinds of stuff, like you're going to have powers, is what they're telling them. That could happen. It's not to say that that's impossible. It's just to be so disingenuous in saying that these symptoms are coming from something metaphysical, and from the sun. I can't actually disprove the sun thing, in every way, but um, essentially, like, it could backfire for all they know. Giving them these ideas of what's happening. What if they make that happen within their body? I found that
Yeah,
to
then
be an
there's like a
interesting thought.
misalignment with what is, right?
Yeah.
Or what other
Yeah.
people are living in.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was funny. I don't know. There's a lot of metaphysical stuff like that, where it still interests me, but the level to which we have been misled, generally speaking, in every facet of this existence, is fairly intense. History and science, and just a whole bunch of stuff is not even close to what we have been, I won't even say led to believe, I'll say indoctrinated with, because much of it, like you said, you don't have a choice in going to school for 13, 14 years. um And within that time, especially in early development, it does build your framework of reality. And even now, there are times where I have to think about something more than once. And then, on second or third thought, or go round of thinking about it, it's like, oh, these thoughts that I'm, currently going with are predicated upon this first thought that came from first grade. An example would be like, space or dinosaurs, or there are things that we believe in as a civilization that we don't have direct proof of being exactly as we've been told. Not to say that they don't exist, just we a bunch of givens,
Yeah.
if you go to a museum and look at the dinosaur skeletons and you say, oh, where was this one found? Is this the real one? They're very likely going to say to you, no, we keep the real ones in the back. We keep them safe in the back. And so,
Just a player rendition.
yeah, exactly. It's plaster. If you look into many paleontology excursions, they, I'm not trying to I'm
Yeah,
not trying to
that's a
ruin
whole
anybody's
world of
career.
thought, but it's a good example because it's like, um, I didn't I didn't really even consider the whole thing with the dinosaurs until, like, I'm gonna say, like, 8 years ago, and when I was kinda, like, rethinking about it, and I'm like, "You know what? I don't even think I really believe in this whole dinosaur concept thing," like, the more I'm considering it fresh, and that was the process I had to go through when I went through that one of those original, I wanna call it, like, enlightenment, but I could see how someone else might just call it a midlife crisis, I mean, but there's really not a whole lot of difference because I don't see it enlightenment like something like you get to this ray of light and now you're enlightened. Like, every moment we have the possibility to totally go downhill in our psychic, spiritual, mental, physical being, or learn more and get better and stronger. There's no point which you get there and you're there, at least not in this physical realm that we're in. But
Right.
you know, the the point is that when I had that experience, it and I'll tell you a little bit what started it was the chemtrails and the weather engineering. I was like studying that topic, looking into all the aspects of that topic. And then I started talking to people everywhere I went. I started asking them, and I was getting the blank stares. I was getting the people that were calling me names. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. But what I noticed was in the end, I wasn't able to definitively prove that, yes, weather engineering is going on in exactly such and such a manner. But I was able to recognize for sure that the mass majority of humans around me weren't willing to look at the topic in a real honest way and think about it with me. They were resisting the subject. They didn't really want to know the truth of the subject. And that was a bigger realization to me than what I came to understand about what's going on in the sky. It's just the fact that humans are not all on the same page in terms of what reality is and how to ask questions and work on finding the closest we can to whatever truth there is. That they're not even willing to do it for the most part, that process on something that gets a little bit difficult, which is scary.
Well, the funny thing is that's like one of the things that I do on my channel is for situations like that. Like there's more than a couple videos on my channel where I not only prove geoengineering, but I show patents. I show documentation of experimentation. I show what chemicals are in it. There's a lot there. Like
Yeah,
and it's very important so that like someone like you in that situation that's like, look, they're spraying us. If someone has the cognitive dissonance to not even acknowledge that, I in my mind it's like now they can go to my channel and be like, just watch this dude talk about it, and you can see the patents. He's posted the patents and them admitting that they're doing like, I go find these things and put them in one spot so that, hopefully, like you said earlier, if just one person switches from being that cognitively dissonant person that does not want to hear the truth to being someone that's like, oh man, I'm so sorry that I called you those names. I'm going to help you tell people about this. That could continue over and over and over again. So, though I can look at I mean, you can look up and see that that's weird. I didn't feel like I needed all that documentation and to look up patent numbers and stuff like that. But for the beings that do need that, here you go. You know what I mean? Like, you can have them now.
Yeah, and keep in mind, for me, that all that research I was doing, I'm talking back in like 2011,
Yeah.
2012. I had reams of pictures and videos I took. I took the topic really seriously. I didn't want to, but back when I talked with people about it then, it was a whole different world than now. Now I can bring it up with your average person, and it's not even that difficult of a topic. Back then, it was like, "What did you just say?" You know, like people were shocked. You know, it was a whole different world. So, maybe we're coming along a little bit in certain ways, but like I think in the bigger ways we haven't moved that much and not nearly enough because, like for instance, what we saw during after the great scam was 99%. I mean, it seemed like it. It seemed like the vast majority of people were just willing to go along with whatever the authorities were telling them and didn't want to have their own original thought. And if they did, I saw it many times because I was fighting the mask thing. And I saw people behind those masks that were saying in their own mind, like, I don't really agree with this either, but I'm just going to say what my boss told me to say. You can't come in my store or whatever, like people didn't believe their own bullshit that they were spouting. Even then, you could see it in their eyes, and that's one thing that you said earlier that I wanted to bring up is our BS detector. Like we don't even really have a word for our bullshit detector, but it's like one of the most important tools we have is to be able to discern truth from lies, and we can really tune in when you're awake, aware human being and standing in front of another human being. It's pretty obvious when someone's lying. You know what I mean? Like when you learn to look for it, right?
Yeah, man. And for me, there's two things that have really helped me to like progress with that. One of them is continuity. So like using the example of NASA, right? Because I still get self-conscious a little bit when I say space is fake. I don't mean that in a literal sense. I said that in a video recently that I'm not saying that in a literal sense. Oh, it's the Church of Physics video. I go through this whole thing of explaining like it's to get you to kind of very quickly like, what did you just say? You don't believe in space? So that you maybe potentially ask me what I mean by it so that I can maybe get some conversations off in a different way. But like NASA lies about most of what they put out, but they tell you if you look for it. So when you see pictures of Earth or when you see pictures from space, they will tell you that those are renderings of data, not actual pictures. And depending on, where you look or who you ask, there's a varying level of truth that'll be told. And when you kind of compile all of the truthful things that you find when kind of scrutinizing NASA, why would I believe them anymore after finding all of these things that, you know, go look up a picture of the moon lander and tell me that that actually happened, you know? Uh, we supposedly got through the Van Allen belt. Some refer to it as the firmament. And for some reason, we can no longer do that. But we did it that one time, but we can't do it anymore. And the reason for that is because we lost the technology. They lost it. It's in a place somewhere, but they'll find it and then we can do it again. There are all these things that build up to me and they add continuity and context. And so if you can get past all of these things that I can present, that's not even 10% of me kind of like not debunking space, but showing that we've been definitely misled and lied to in very many ways. So then why should I believe in that iteration of space? I believe that there is something above. I just know that I've been lied to about much of it. And so I had to pull back a good bit of that information that I thought to be true. And now when I look up, sure, I'll refer to those as stars. But if you get even just a good camera, there are two videos on my channel. I zoomed in on stars, and they don't look like what most of the beings walking around think they look like. And that goes for many other things in the sky. And so I'm not saying I know what those are. I'm just saying I know that they're not what they say that they are. And I'm very comfortable in saying that now, whereas I used to, not be. But continuity, as well as just like being conscious of realizations. I talk about sometimes how those of us that are in within these circles where we're trying to look for, quote, the truth, or we're trying to figure out this place and make more sense of it, we come to a realization. It's sometimes very, very world building or groundbreaking or, truth shattering or whatever you want to call it. You may take another step, and it's very easy to forget that you made this realization because you have all of this other stuff that's been drilled into you your entire life. So you may, for instance, to go along with the same example, you may come back a couple steps off of the concept of space, but then you go check your horoscope tomorrow morning, or you look up and you say, oh, that's a shooting star. You know, these concepts that we have built off of these other things are predicated upon foundations that are built within many times something we were lied to about. And so, like, I find it very, very helpful to, I don't like using buzzwords, but to be mindful of the things that I think as I think them. If I think something and I'm like, oh, wait, I just said I don't believe in that, yesterday, then I try to, like, okay, so then what does that mean about the thing I just thought? And it's very helpful. This stuff doesn't happen overnight. You don't just switch the way that you view this existence overnight. If you keep reminding yourself of continuity and realization, then you end up in a place where you're not just rejecting everything, but you are being conscientious, and you are, like, you know, at the very least, stress testing the things that are told to you so that you're not led by the nose like a farm animal.
Absolutely. And the other, I thought of two things, like, well, while you were talking, there's a part of me that sometimes wants to believe something. You mentioned that earlier too. Like, I've always been intrigued by, like, um the giant stuff, or like the intervention theory. I've read a lot of Zachariah Sitchin books, and I noticed at a certain point down that path, like, because I was having so much fun, I was like really enjoying it. Because, okay, my dad was a preacher, so I know a lot of biblical stuff. And then when I started studying that stuff, and those Netflix shows were coming out with the ancient aliens, I noticed that part of me that was like getting really happy, that was having fun with it, right? And that's a dangerous thing, because there's that confirmation bias where I notice there's part of me that wants to prove the theory that I like the best. And I see that a lot, especially in people in certain religious groups where that I've been part of in the past. I was part of the Christianity cult at one time when I was young,
Yeah.
but that's what busted me out of it, was asking good questions about what is it I'm part of? Why are they saying things the way they're saying? Why did the things in history happen that happened? And so it busted that. So part of it is keeping aware of our own, like, lean, or where we want it to go, and see, and that's like knowing yourself. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm starting to feed the beast in a way. I'm trying to lead myself down that trail. So we catch ourselves when we're good at knowing ourselves. And then the other thing I've noticed is what I call offended, right? People get offended in a conversation, or I'll notice, like, my, like, hackles getting up when somebody says a certain thing. And whenever that happens to me now, I know that's a sign there's something I have to learn there. Because the only times we get off ended, out of balance, is because some other thing has popped into our reality that is either obscuring or pushing something else off the shelf that we used to want to believe or think. And this new thought is like kind of scary. So we have the tendency to be like, to defend our old thought, like, and that's that offended thing. Like, so anytime I feel that in myself, that like need to want to like, no, fight my point, it's like usually almost 99.9% of the time, there's something that needs to be learned right there. And I need to back off and be humble and be like, hey, why am I getting offended?
Yeah, true. Man, it's funny you bring up Zachariah Sitchin because that's specifically whose work is being used in that op that I mentioned earlier. His work is being used, and I don't think that I think there's a potential for him for that to have been like why he wrote it in a way. When you look into his when you look into how he was when he was alive and some of the things that people around him said, like there's some weird stuff about it, but there's you
Pretty
know,
sure he was a Mason
yeah,
or high-ranking Mason or connected to stonemasons, which doesn't necessarily make him
true.
evil or bad, but it does show. We do know that there's a continuity of some connections within that guild
Yeah.
that are
There's a
necessary.
faction. There's definitely a faction within the Masons that, there's a duality, just like what I believe is in most things. There are some good Masons, but there are a lot of not good Masons, and they do a lot of very, nefarious, large scale stuff. Uh, and, you know,
It's a
there
network,
are
right?
it is. It definitely is. And there's a guy currently, there's this weird thing happening right now. And I'm trying to like not necessarily stay too attentive to it or let alone get involved in it. But there's a guy named Billy Carson that is fairly famous. He's been on Ancient Aliens and the History Channel and Gaia and all this stuff. But he pushes that kind of Zachariah Sitchin narrative. And there's another guy who has done a lot of research and has backed up chronology from text, from he's an independent researcher, and he's just as accomplished in many senses as Billy Carson is. Dude's named Jason Brashears. He's got a channel called Archaics. So I don't have a dog in the fight either way, but I am very, very objective in certain aspects of research, specifically scientific about it. Jason Brashears has disproven many aspects of the current narrative of the Anunnaki. The Anuna is what they're actually referred to. And Anunnaki just means, I think it means like royalty from the sky or descended from the sky or something like that. And the current story, that original circles either, like this, it's really weird. This is how I kind of solidified for myself that it's some form of operation. Is it's very, very like compartmentalized, but you can see that the overall narrative is used, and then little aspects of it are tweaked for each little group that's being sprinkled with it. So there are Aboriginals that are like, um, you know, uh, you're the true chosen ones, and you're the bloodline of the Anunnaki, and they're coming back, and when they come back everything's going to be better for you, and so on and so forth. Then you look into another group, and they're also being told that everyone are descended from the Anunnaki, which is not false. That is true. That is true. But there are other little things being sprinkled onto it. For instance, there's a dude that says that he's inky. I don't remember his name, but he has kind of like curly, sandy, grayish hair, and just very strange disposition for inky to have chosen. But that's neither here nor there. Just um, Zachariah Sitchin's work is currently being used to like push these weird narratives, and there are other kind of aspects that are helping, that is helping to work. So that ascension symptom stuff I was talking about earlier, Zachariah Sitchin's work is kind of being used to facilitate that on specific groups of, and not just Aboriginal people. Like there's a whole bunch of other people that are look it up when we get done with this. You'll
Yeah,
it's
yeah, you got
really
me
messed up.
curious because that, like, but I was never stuck on his ideas. Like the certain proposals he makes in that book, some of them seemed a little preposterous to me. But
Yeah.
what again, it's like I feel like people always want to sidestep what's most important. And these a lot of these rabbit holes or things people go down are like distractions. They're and I
Yep.
keep thinking of this term sidestepping because even like those um I think when your last video you were talking about those two thinkers conversation. I started watching them talk a little bit. I didn't get too deep into it. But it's like a lot of these, and okay, here's a better example. I've been listening to Immanuel Kant, one of his books. And this guy, man, he's got a lot to say. It's very interesting, but it's convoluted, man. He starts getting to words within words and repeating them and just going around and around on like a Ferris wheel. And a lot of philosophy I've listened to like that. Like I'm interested, I'm super curious about philosophy, but like at a certain point, there's nothing that's that complicated that you know what I mean? Like the actual stuff isn't that complicated. And a lot of that extra complication that science wants to do or people want to do at these various rabbit holes are just kind of sidestepping the obvious truth, which is we're actually alive right now. We're actually humans in human bodies. And there's stuff going down right now around us in our communities and in our world that we have an effect on, right? And so, yeah, what happened in ancient history past is interesting and it might tell us some more about ourselves and we can have some better knowledge. But how does it actually pertain in context to what we have to do right now ahead of us or tomorrow or the message we're giving to the public? You know what I mean?
It
And that's what
depends.
frustrates
It
me.
depends because there's situations where, so that same situation that I was talking about with Brashears and Carson, the reason that usually when I see back and forths like that, I am very, very quickly, I'm very quickly turned off by it. I don't want to hear that because it's not only not helpful, but it just, I don't know. I'm just not attracted to that energy from people. But the reason that I continue to pay attention to it is because it has implications for the current and the future. Um, there are specific catastrophic events that happen at specific intervals of time, um, and depending on um, how many years it's been, they are at varying levels of extinction level, almost not completely extinction level, but like apocalyptic, you could almost call it, not in the totality sense, just like so we in our earlier talk we talked about underground civilizations, right? And the concept of what drove those beings to go underground like that, you know and there are events that happen where things are so far out of whack from what we're used to, speaking in even in terms of like physics, weather, like breathing air, all these things. um Jason Brashears calls them phoenix events, but they're spoken about all over. I mean, it's in the Bible. These events have all kinds of different implications for society, and one of these events is in the Enuma Elish. So the Anuna have to do with something that not only can potentially be happening very soon, but it also lends to things in the past that we've seen before. I've got a video called 1902 that kind of references a bit of this. I'm definitely not a journalist. My videos are different than that, but I when I talk about specific things, I try to give you enough context where you'll, at least if you're interested, you'll go look into it. But like, that's the reason why there's certain aspects of history that are important, because they're cyclical. So 2040 is purported to be the next time that something is supposed to happen. If you are to listen to Carson's interpretation of things, not only does he not reference the cyclical nature of these apocalyptic events, but he's essentially misleading people on what the Anuna are in general, telling them that he's one of the Anuna and all these very strange things to say. Whereas other researchers, including dude from Archaics, are saying like, look, this is serious stuff. There's repetitive and redundant, behaviors that you notice happen before these events happen. And some of them are celebrities selling off their properties, building bunkers, disappearing, or saying that they've died, or gotten arrested on something very serious, and you won't see them for a long while. These are all things that are happening right now, currently. Whether they're actually happening or they just want us to believe they are, it's still, it's still significant. So like, there's the potential for these historic events, at least specifically with the Enuma Elish and the Anuna, that give us a potential way to like, not, tell the future, but to at least prepare for an event that is very likely going to look like one that's already happened before, in the past. Not 1902, it was before that. 1902 wasn't really that bad, but people die in these events. And, if you choose to perpetuate and push, for instance, using Billy Carson and Zachariah Ascension, that version or iteration of these stories, you're leaving specific things out and changing things around, or not giving a shit about the accuracy of it. And more people could, at the very least, choose to live a better version of life, if they know, oh, there are some things that could potentially be coming that could change everything for everyone. Because these, people, there are a lot of people don't live through these, depending on which one you look at. It's every 138 years. Not so. 1902 was not that intense. I think it's every 3. So it's 138 years for each one. Every 3 of those, every third one is supposed to be pretty fucked up, if I'm not mistaken.
So like I'm totally with you on that, like, because that, I mean, that's the one thing I did take away from Zachariah Sitchin, for instance, is that there's pretty conclusive evidence that there's been a great flood. For instance, there's been these cataclysmic events on the surface of the planet, and they're charted in many different ancient cultures on stones carved. There are a lot of indications that on the surface of this planet, ever so often, some heavy stuff goes down. But we also know that there's any of us that have spent any time looking into things, there is a grand conspiracy. That there is a trouble with the ruling class, the authority that exists right now on this planet, that can hide massive things from us, from the average person, that we can't access. So like, that's kind of where my point is in terms of importance. When we think strategy, like, let's just say that that's true, that maybe coming right up, 20 years from now, something's going to go down, some shit's going to go down, right? And we were actually able to do enough research where we were all pretty much confirm it between a bunch of us on the internet, right? What could we do about it if we're still owned and controlled by like Rothschilds and government and all these authorities that can just sick all their drones on us and make us do whatever they want? They could put us all on buses. They could spray a bunch of poison on us, force us underground. Like, if we don't have the ability to recognize our sovereignty or to work together or find common ground on what is right or wrong, how the hell are we going to do anything about it, even if we were able to figure out what it was, that's happening? That's kind of my point. It's just a question of priorities and importance. Until we can communicate, until we can work together, until we can see the enemy for what it is, We're not going to ever find the secrets. If we all work together, why don't we storm the Vatican? I heard someone talking about that recently. Like, why don't we dig underneath all around the pyramids and see what's down there? Maybe the freaking answers are right there. But we don't have the ability to work together in that way because of the system of control that's in place, which is
For sure. And I mean, my answer to that would be different depending on the situation. Like for those last two things you said, my answer would kind of be the same, where it's like same thing I said with the concept of not participating. Like if enough of us do a thing, then we can't be defeated. But like you're essentially saying, there's not enough of us that are willing to go through the discomfort or through the scary situation to take the chance in that. And it's not really a chance. It's just enough of us have to care and then take that, leap and not, kind of go back on our word. Because my thought would be that even those that say, yeah, let's get this fucking done, many of them would say that, and then as soon as they saw an M1 or something or a smoke bomb or something, they would be like, oh, well, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. I'm out. But with those events, Brashears calls them Phoenix events. And it's not just Brashears. He's just done the most extensive research on it. With those, there is no, even if we all decide, it doesn't matter what we do. If anything, I was more so saying like if we were to be more aware of that, people would be living their lives differently. They would very, very likely be more loving. They would be more conscientious of how they treat each other. They would maybe have different goals and different things that they hold dear to themselves rather than fiat currency and vacations and stuff like that. Not to say that, vacations would be possible or that it wouldn't be possible to have nice things. It would just look much different than this. But the only thing we would be able to do to avoid that physically would be to go underground. And until, like you were basically, and even honestly, I don't think that if all of us, every single one of us decided, you know what, I don't like this, we're still not getting into their, I mean, because they've had these underground kind of Haydens. They're called Edens. That's where the story of Eden comes from, the Enuma Elish. There's not one, there's lots. We now call them underground bases, and they're technologically advanced. So we're not getting into them. And so from my point of view, it's not to be dystopian or anything like that, but I'm more so saying that I have reached a level of peace, and I'm not completely at peace. I still have outside stuff that's messing with me and causing me issue and stuff like that. But as far as when people talk about end times and apocalypse and all that, I don't care. I don't give a shit about that, because what are you going to do about it? Even if all of us were to decide, you know what, we're not taking this anymore. That's not the type of apocalyptic event that matters. The ones that are being kind of propagated and pushed by the agencies, I'll call it, so that I don't get murdered. Those aren't real. You know what I mean? It's to keep you scared shitless for multiple reasons. But the apocalyptic event or events that do matter are very metaphysical, in a sense that they're utilizing technologies that we are not currently capable of understanding. And there are accounts of these things in books. Charles Fort has a book talking about the events of 1902, and that's not even a bad one. Weird shit, like weird red materials falling from the sky, mud falling from the sky, green clouds, like just, it's terraforming. This is not something that can be necessarily like avoided by us. I just think it would help us to live much differently in the interim until whatever happens. There's also the probability, in my opinion, that since time has been heavily manipulated, that we're much closer to this than even Brashears is saying. He says 2040, but I wonder if he's taking into account how many edits have happened to history.
Well, here's an example that occurred to me. My girlfriend and I just the other night watched Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
You've seen that yet, but it's kind of telling, any movie you got to be a little suspicious, but they're telling the story from one perspective of how things might have gone down, based on some facts we do have. Like, okay, the atomic bombs did drop in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, like massive devastation during that period of time. And if you think about it, like those bombs from just some villager who was chilling in Nagasaki right then, that's the end of the world, man. That's it. That is this thing, end time shit. And it went down and they didn't know it was coming. You're just average Joes walking down the street. What could they do about it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, we have very real events that we can look to in life that happened like that. And there were a lot of people involved, like that one, for instance, where it shows Oppenheimer built this whole little fake city in Los Alamos, right? All those people were there like ants swarming around doing their jobs, and not enough of them had the sense to be like, hey guys, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Is this really even a moral thing to be doing what we're doing here? Like, maybe we should blow the lid off this. Like, not enough people had the honesty and the courage to speak up about what I think is the most important binding characteristic of our reality, which is morality, is whether what we're doing is right or wrong. Every person at that base had the ability to make that choice in every moment at every day. Do I just keep going along with this program and see how it comes out and see what happens? Or do I recognize that I'm part of something that's creating a weapon that could potentially kill 700,000 people in one moment at the touch of a button? And should I fight against that? Like, people are acting like there's no such thing as morality, but they did have the choice. Everybody there had a choice to either go along with it or fight against it. And I'm like, we're doing a lot of shit that's causing massive catastrophes around the world by just cooperating. And I really appreciate what you're saying. What if just for like, shit, not even 2 weeks, what about one day we just all stop driving? Boy, that'd put a dent in their money, and then it causes a problem. It's like, let's find out. Let's fuck around and find out with this authority system, how we can change the situation. Because right now it's consistently doing damage on the emotional, physical, and our spiritual levels. And we're not doing much to stop it as people. I think we are, by talking about it and trying to create awareness and having, open thought. So I'm
Yeah.
curious.
The
Thoughts
reason
on
I say
that?
the reason I say that amount of time is because originally I did say like 1 or 2 days or something like that. But then, we all view them as being these mindless greed buckets where if they even have a few hours of no money coming in, they start to dematerialize or disintegrate or something. But I think very quickly, and I think that they are probably a bit like that, but I think very quickly, if they realize the magnitude of the issue, meaning everyone has turned on me and has decided to stop, participating in this or that or whatever, whether it's stopping the payments on rent. My position is to stop everything and to position it sometime around the first of the month so that even rent is included and mortgages are included in this also. But the reason I say the amount of time is because I think that very quickly they would adjust in their mind, because that's just how our brains work, rather than just snapping, because especially for them, they have these practices of mental strength and dominance and all these things. So one day they may panic a little bit, but I think that very quickly they'll say, this isn't gonna last. They're gonna crawl back to me. So a week to 2 weeks, including the first of the month, in my opinion, it shows the capability to stick to it for an uncomfortable amount of time, which proves one point to them. And then also it shows it they would really, that's a hole in the pocket for a minute. A full week of not, because these, if you look into how much these beings make per hour, it's gross, you know? So if they make that much in an hour, imagine how much they lose in a week or 2 weeks. And, again, it's not to say that we just give up on everything. There's certain stuff I can't say, but you can get the things you need if you need to get them. And then there's also your neighbors and family and stuff like that. It's not to say that the discomfort would be excruciating, because it's the same thing they said to everybody in 2020, 2 weeks and we're done, you know, uh, except for, rather than someone else telling you when your 2 weeks is up and lying to you about it, essentially, you decide. You give it the 2 weeks and plan ahead of time. It's not something that gets springed on you. We would decide when to do this. It's very similar. It's almost poetic in a way, the 2 week thing. But I don't anticipate it happening, and it's just I more so say it to prove a point in a few ways, because honestly, it's one of the more fringe thoughts that I have. But I think that many of the beings that are walking around are not even of the same. They're not us. You know what I mean? In whether you want to look at it figuratively or literally, there's a large portion that won't do these things. They won't entertain these ideas, because they're not built for that mentally or physically. Like there's there's a metaphysical view that I have on that, and then there's a more literal iteration of it also. But I say this to get very specific people to think about it and maybe have some sort of like little tiny explosion happen in their brain. But I don't think that's actually going to happen. There wouldn't be enough being, because everyone always has like an excuse. Well, I got to pay my rent. I got kids. Yeah, just don't leave.
Yeah, well, we live in a pretty interesting time that way, where how fragmented we are. I mean, like a lot of the stuff we hear in history kind of just blows me away, just to think about, like, um, when one huge group of people assembled an army and like went across a mountain and attacked another area. Like, I don't think we even have that type of ability to motivate people on a mass scale, the way certain people did in history. Like, people are so fragmented now. um it's like, I guess here what I'm getting at, I spent some time doing some like teamwork, team challenge stuff. And I've traveled around this country a good bit. I've been in a lot of different places. I'm a person that talks to people out in the open. I'm not like shy. And I've noticed that there is commonality in people. Like, most people want to be like good. Most people want to get along. And yet on the other hand, and also I noticed that teamwork is possible. I got to see it work many times, in certain conditions, when the conditions were right. But more often than not, the world we're living in, people don't work together. They're working under what the system tells them to do, what the directions are being given to them. So if we were able to form a plan within groups like they did on GameStop, those guys got together and worked on their stocks, I think that, we as humans could accomplish incredible things. But right now, what's inhibiting us is that people don't believe that's possible. And that's partly because we can't find common ground on what's right and wrong. We're letting authorities tell us what's right and wrong, and they're saying what's right and wrong based on what makes money and power for them. And so I feel like the real answer for normal people like you and I, who are searching for truth, who are searching for answers, and it's not a definitive answer, but I think it's a huge part of the answer, is learning to relate to one another and finding some kind of standards of what is right and wrong, and how do we treat each other morally, so that we can distinguish the liars and the cheaters as a group, as a community, and be able to see the lies and split them out, split the chaff from the wheat. But it takes a community to do that, and there's been communities all through history that have managed to create a certain cohesiveness and a generational understanding of what they stand for. And it's been broken down in so many cases that we're all fragmented, and we got to rebuild that glue of our understanding how to get stuff done and relate to one another before we're going to face these bigger challenges.
Agreed. Have you heard of the Rockefeller Manifesto?
Oh yeah.
Have you read it?
No. Parts of it probably, you know, I've bumped into quotes and stuff, but I haven't sit down and read the whole thing. No.
This is what we are in currently is specifically the success of the Rockefeller Manifesto. This is the affirmation of the Rockefeller Manifesto. One of the things that I quote a lot that's a part of that manifesto is uh by the time we're done, and I'm paraphrasing, by the time we're done, they won't know what to think. They won't know what's true or false. They won't know what's up or down. They won't know what's right or left. And or right or wrong, I believe. Um, that's where we're kind of at, but still seeing the progression of currently. And I think that that really, really has a lot to do with the level of distrust that the average being has for the next household or the next being, because we've all been fed so much stuff, and as time has progressed, there's now algorithms that further that to a very, very minute level of accuracy. um it's they specifically chart out what they were going to do, and they did it. And you know, whether someone wants to call that paranoia or conspiracy, I think that the intellectual mind could read through that manifesto and after each point ask themselves, do I see that in current times? And if you come back with anything other than, oh, fuck, then you're delusional. You are in denial. Um, it's not a comfortable thing to realize or think of, but I think that that's one of the first steps in fixing it is not the right terminology, but addressing it. Trying to figure out how to get ourselves out of this ditch, because you know psychological operations are just the tip of the iceberg. But look at how many psychological operations are and have been going on, you know? And I don't just mean within the technological era, like psychological operations have been going on for so long that I think we don't know what to think. We don't know what's right or wrong. We don't know what's left or right, just like they said. For there to be agencies that are a part of the government that do things like, fake vampire attacks in order to accomplish an op, that's maybe over the line. There's stuff there's stuff
We
that
go too
happens.
far this time.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's I'm prepping right now. I put a video out recently that I felt very uncomfortable putting out, but I view this thing that I'm doing as very important, and I'm trying to be um as open a book as I can be. And it was I had watched a movie called Ultrasound, and I had some like weird revelation type feelings from the movie, and I essentially talk about the very real um, situation of frequency manipulation. It's a very, very, very large part of what is being experimented with and utilized currently in a whole bunch of ways. The when people talk about like geoengineering, weather manipulation stuff, frequency. When people talk about HARP and direct energy weapons, frequency. Microwave technology and non-lethal weapons, frequency. There's something called suggestibility frequency, which is what this movie Ultrasound is about. It's disturbing that you can do this with frequency, and not only would not many be aware of it. But when I talk about it, or when, someone talks about it, not many care. Essentially, in the video, I talk about watching this movie, getting very freaked out from personal experience that I've had in my life. Um, and then I tried to calm myself down by looking up suggestibility frequency. The second result was a white paper. The third result was a white paper. If you're not familiar, those of you out there that take when you hear us talk about these things, if you go look them up, look up suggestibility frequency. The first, couple of results are going to bring up things from like PubMed. PubMed is a resource that is specifically for physicians and researchers to look at peer-reviewed studies. Peer-reviewed studies are when you do experimentation or studies of certain kinds, and then you publish for the rest of the community or academia to look over what you have proven or at least researched or experimented with. They are experimenting with suggestibility frequency. And, this isn't the first time that I've talked about something within this capacity, but they do this thing where they put out patents and they put out white papers talking about a technology, but they pose it in a way that sounds like it's going to be great for humanity. We're going to do all these beautiful things for people. We're going to, we're going to heal your body. We're going to get rid of your PTSD. We're going to, solve hunger or whatever they say. But then if you take an extra step and not just take them at their word and think about the other potential applications of these technologies and these techniques, you will be horrified. Just think about the term suggestibility frequency. Within this movie, they had these people thinking that they were in completely different rooms. They had backstories that they thought were real. Even now, I'm having the same effect that I had in the video that I put out, because not to make it into a long story, but I had a situation happen where I was what I refer to as kidnapped and put into prison. And I was sentenced to 10 years, which I didn't even think it would get to that point. I thought I'd be released because I'm not guilty, right? That's not real. But I was sentenced to 10 years of my life. And then through the appellate process, I hope I got myself out in 3 years. After watching this movie, I'm not necessarily so sure if I got myself out, But I talk about how they would pull people out of their cells in the middle of the night. And prisons they have the names that lead you to believe that they are government, facilities, and few of them are, but most of them are private. And if you look into what those same entities and companies, corporations and beings, what else they own, what else they do and dabble in, then you may be able to start piecing together what potential things I could be talking about. But the fact that you can take a being, use specific frequencies to make them lose consciousness, to essentially you're hypnotizing them, but in a sense that is far past making them hop on one foot in a wedding, for entertainment. These things have very real implications that can do very real things to people. And there are a lot of things like that, where if you look up a specific thing, you will find white papers. And it's stuff that if you or I were to go talk to somebody about it that doesn't necessarily dabble in this type stuff, they'll call one of us crazy. That's not real. And even like you said earlier, it's the kind of Agent Smith effect thing, where I can tell them about it and then show them the white paper, the peer-reviewed study, and then they'll still say, but that's not real. Or they'll say, but it says they're going to help people. It says that it's for this, not for what you're saying. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance that really, I at first thought that it was just a level of intelligence, but I think that there's other stuff potentially going on even now that could, explain why we're in such a boat that we're in currently. So it's not to say that everything is just hopeless, but it's the art of war. You have to know your enemy. If you don't know your enemy, then you're at a loss, and a respect for your enemy is where that starts. If you think that you're too smart for them to get at you, or you just hate them so much that you can't even think straight, you've already lost it all.
Yeah, and that's the true battle is within each of ourselves, both on this journey of like learning and questioning things, and then the harder battle is dealing with other human beings and relating to them, and how do we communicate these things. But I'm going to kind of draw things to a close. I really appreciate meeting you, and I think this bridge that we created is a perfect example of what I think is what the takeaway from this conversation is, that you can have reasonable conversations with other human beings. Is partly where you hang out and what questions you ask. And then, like, we only met a couple weeks ago or a week ago, and we're already calling each other brother. Like you called me a sibling. It's like, but I feel that same vibration when I meet you and when I've met other people like you. And so I think you'll really appreciate some of the people in the End Evil podcast community. So I think what I'll do is I'll stream this episode on Thursday, and we always have a little chat going during the stream. So maybe you can stop in and get to know some of the friends in my community. And I'd recommend looking into natural law, Mark Passio and his seminar on the science of natural law, because that's a lot of what influenced a lot of the people that I work together with on what we call the one great work. But man, I'm open to have more discussions and curious what you have to say. People, check out Gamma AU Obsidian YouTube page and listen to his talks and convos. And anything else you want to shout out or advertise or say before we close up?
Not too much. All right, so I will do this. I have a problem with self-promotion. I don't know what that is. Maybe self-sabotage or something. I am trying to build a company. The way I view it is that it is already, a company, but I put a lot of work into this. We all, those of us that are doing this type of work, including Chris, like we put a lot of work into this. And so those of us that do, ask for donations and things of that nature may have a hard time at first. I have a PayPal that is in the link of all of the descriptions of my videos, and it's in the description of the channel. I'm trying to build something that I think can be beneficial for many of us. And there's a lot of lofty aspirations within it, but I am very, very dedicated to it, and am doing it for the rest of you as much as I'm doing it for myself. So if you check out my work and you think there's benefit or value to it, it would be very appreciated if you send a donation for the company.
Awesome. And I'll share those links in the description with this episode as well.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I look forward to future conversations and interactions. And I really thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I want to have you on. We already said you're gonna come on the show soon as you have time.
Yeah, let's do it. Sounds like a plan.
Nice.
Oh.
I'm in a cage. I'm in a prison. I'm in a mental prison, and a physical one at that, and definitely a spiritual one, whether that's recognized at a conscious level or not.
As I wait for my sleep, the situation's got me thinking deep. Will ever the same? And all life is an extinction. Evil creeps in your dreams. Secret teams throwing memes in the filling in the in-betweens. Mind control for the teens. Now they got you on your my way through this open maze, but I'm dazed by mass confusion. All the images that they're using.
There's the rat race to the tip of the top of the pyramid. The pyramid.
Falling in, to this low level of spiritual awareness, such that these methods can have any effect over us.